Okay, so we're ready to deal with procedural stuff. And we're going to begin with the puddles. First off, we want to take care of this opacity. And, well, we're going to put it in a bunch of places, but first thing I want to do is set that up so it works as the snow goes up. My opacity is also going to increase because, the ice is not as clear as the clear water. So I'm double-clicking on my node here. I'm going to go into my opacity, and we're going to create an empty function. Well, let's see what happens if we do it directly to snow. So it starts out with nothing, which doesn't, it looks fine if you look at it from an angle, but it really needs something. And then as we move the slider up, it very quickly begins to get opaque. And again, I don't want it to do that because the way I have this material planned out is only at the halfway point do things start to get, it's at the halfway point things are going to be approaching, as far as the snow is concerned, full cover. And then things that go beyond the halfway point on the slider is the snow getting a bit deeper and the ice beginning to develop sort of its own little coat of whiteness. It's going to look really weird if we do it like this because it's icing up, it's beginning to ice up when there's only just like little bits of snow on the ground, which makes no sense. So we can't have it as a one-to-one relationship. We have to do something about that. So I'm going to come back into my opacity, and I can click on the little thing there, and it'll just bring me into edit my function. And we're going to keep it super simple. I'm going to multiply this by 0.5 and make that the output. So what that means is that this ice will never get beyond 0.5, which is fine because, first of all, these are shallow little puddles. And with shallow little puddles, even when they're completely frozen over, you can still see some of the stuff in there. So this is now at full opacity. So it's pretty much how I want it to look because I can still kind of see what's going on underneath, but it is somewhat opaque. Now, there's a lot of other things going wrong with it, but that's different. But as far as the opacity goes, I think that's fine. Now, the only problem I have left with it as it stands right now is when we get down to the other end. I don't want it ever to reach 0. And again, that's a pretty easy fix because what I do is I take this result and just add some small number to it, like 0.2. No, even smaller, I think 0.1. So what ends up happening is that its maximum now will be 0.6 instead of 0.5, and I'm totally okay with that. But at the lower end, we now have some sort of opacity happening in the water, which is better because when, we can look at it from any angle and we actually see water. And then as it slides up, there's no appreciable difference at the other end. So that's that part done. The color, the color is only part of the equation right now. What's happening as it gets more opaque is that it's basically exactly the same thing, only more opaque. And, that's not what ice really looks like. And, the process of getting there also, it's all completely flat. And, when you watch ice develop on little puddles, it starts out as kind of little chunks, and then it gets heavier and heavier and heavier until it's actually solid. And to do that, we want to do a normal map. But at the same time, I want, just like we had in the ground, I want my colors to be represented off my normal map because that's where we're going to get that snowy layer that's going to go on top of this as it ices up. So I'm going to the library, and we're going to get cells 1. And I'm going to set the scale to 18, and I'm going to get a warp node. And I'm going to warp it against itself, not by too much. I have it as 0.19. And then we can get a levels node. And we can give a little bit more oomph. And then I'm going to get another warp node. And I'm going to go back to this clouds here that we started off with our rocks texture, and I'm going to warp it against that just a little bit. Yeah, like that. That's good. I'm going to get a transform node, and then I'm going to get another warp node, and we're going to just double this in size, and we're going to warp it again. And on my notes, I had this set at 0.23. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. It's pretty amazing that it came out almost exactly like I had it. But what I'm looking for are these ridges, which is great, and then we're going to, this undulating color. So this is actually, I'm super happy with this. Only we want these ridges to stand up, so I'm going to get an invert grayscale. And let's get a height to normal. Let's see what that looks like. I'm holding down the shift key, and I'm moving that up to there. Okay, so this is full ice. It's a little too much for me, so let's adjust this down. I want to see some areas where it's relatively smooth and some areas where it's not so smooth. And there's a bunch of different reasons why this could be happening, and let's take a look. First, let's lower down the intensity of this normal a little bit. No, you know what? Before we do that, let's lower this down a little bit, because I want that normal pretty intense. And maybe lower this down a little bit. Just take the whole warp thing down a notch. That's already better. Because I don't want it completely rough. I do want some areas that are, that are glassy and smooth. I just want like a little bit that's rough. The other thing we can do is maybe make these a little bit bigger. Yep, getting better. I'm going to add a bit of contrast. So where I have stuff, I want more of it. And then I'm going to go into my warp intensity and lower that down a bit. While there's less places where there's stuff getting rough, it's actually more jagged where there are spots. Let's make it a little bit more jagged now. Yeah, I'm happy with that now. So that is at full. Let's just make sure that our parameter is set to 1. Yep. All right. So that's the normal done for that. Next, we want to do the color. And I'm going to get a normal to height. And I do want the high quality one. And we're going to use this for our color. So we got room out there. We can do that. So this is now going to be the basis of a gradient map. And we can put some nice ice colors in here. Whatever strikes your fancy. Well, let's see before we start messing around with it. So this will be matched up with the full-on color. We're going to need another blend node in here. Because here's the thing. The way we have this set up right now, this water won't go beyond 50% opacity. I mean, there's always going to be stuff seen through it. And my plan is for these ridges here that we've created to have they're going to be white. They're going to have like a dusting of snow on them. And we can't have that at 50% opacity. It has to be at 100% opacity. So we have to handle those two colors separately. And that's why this is the only one that's going to have these two blend nodes, because we're going to blend, we've already blended the watercolor, and now we're going to be blending the snow overlay color. And this mask right here is this, this normal to height we're going to use as the basis for the map, for the mask rather, that we're going to use for that. So I'm now correcting this for a mask. So I want a lot of pure white where I'm going to have full color, but I also want to have areas where I am going to see the water underneath, because I think we're going to want it a little bit less opaque than that, because it's going to be nice. It gives it like some variety. So, you know, maybe something like that. And we can use this as the mask for this second overlay. All right. So we have the color. Now, the only problem is that this mask that we created is kind of global, and we don't want to send this whole color out there. We want to just cut out the pond bits. So we're going to get a blend, and we're going to cut out the pond bits, and we will only use the pieces that we need, and then we can send them down here this way. Yeah, I'm really not happy with that coloring at all. We're going to have to do some work on that gradient map, big time. But see how it overlays on top of the other one. You know what else we need to work on is this. I think I want, before I start working on that color, I'm seeing what happens if I move this intensity up a bit. I'm trying to get rid of, I want like this kind of thing happening in there. And then we can come back into the levels and play around with that. I'm going to put a levels node in here in between this invert and the normal, the height to normal, because I think this is where this fuzziness, I think, is where our problem is here. So let's see if we can't do something about that in here. Yeah, you just got to fool around with it till you're happy. But it's to do with these warps and how contrasty they are. And this is our mask, so let's come back in here and see what we can't do about, because now we're only talking about the color. Before we were talking about the normals and stuff, now it's only about where we're applying color. Start from scratch. Yeah, that's a lot closer to what I want. Yeah, okay. I mean, the roughness is all wrong, but I think as far as the color goes, that's okay, because I want some of this, you know, I'm looking at the white now. I'm not happy with that. Let's change this color down to something a little less chromatic. In fact, I think that we're going to lower, I think part of the problem I'm having with it is it's still too opaque for me. I don't want that to be the maximum opacity. So we're going to come back in here and let's try this at 0.3. let's come back to the color here and maybe come back a little bit darker with it. Again, I'm trying to think about how this water would look if it was completely frozen over. So I'm balancing between the opacity and the color until I'm happy with it. I think I still have it set in here, yeah. All right, that's probably okay. I want to take a quick look and make sure it still looks good when I have no ice at all. Only the color. The rest of the stuff is not moving. Yeah, that's fine. It's just clear water. All right, now we have to get it to actually appear and disappear as we move that slider down. So this opacity is getting taken care of here. And we're going to have to do something about the opacity for this white overlay. And we're going to create an empty function. And it's going to move according to the snow variable, but it's not going to do it on a one-on-one. In fact, I'm going to this is where we're going to split it up between what happens over 0.5 and under 0.5. So if snow is greater than or equal to 0.5, then use whatever this is directly as your result. However, if it's not, we're going to make snow much, much weaker. So again, I'm going to use 0.1, but depending on what you want to make, you can use whatever number you want in there. But so if this number, if the actual slider is greater than 0.5, then it's going to put directly what the actual slider says. So, it goes 0.5 upwards to 1, to full opacity. And that's only talking about this top thing here. If it's less than, then you're going to take snow and you're going to take you're going to multiply it by 0.1, so 1/10 of snow. So under 0.5, it's not going to move nearly as much. And we can take a look and see how that works. Again, it's not for the normal, it's doing it for the color right now only. So it's going, the color is actually disappearing, but it's not completely gone until you go through 0.5. And now all of a sudden, this is like, yeah, it's turned into ice, but it hasn't truly crusted over completely yet. I mean, it hasn't gotten so solid that stuff is, that when snow falls on it, it doesn't get glossy, it stays white. And now we have to make sure that the normal, and that's just the regular color, that's this one, as we're moving through the 0.5, the rest of that opacity. And I think I want to add a little bit more to this one. Oh, no, what am I doing? I want this at 0.5. I want to add here. All right, so let's do the same thing for the normal now. We'll bring this back up to 1. We'll get another blend node. Where's our normal? Here's our normal. I'm going to get into the library and get a normal color, and we'll use that as our background. Because when it's water, we want this completely flat, non-normal. And we can go ahead and copy this. No, this isn't the one I want to copy, sorry. We want to copy this one. And this is going to be kind of the universal formula that we're going to use so that everything, all the opacities kind of scale down together. So I'm double clicking on my new blend node. I'm going into its opacity. We're going to click on here. We're going to do empty function. I'm clicking on that little graph there. And now I'm just going to paste this in here, and I'm going to set this as my output node. And we then hook it into the normal spot. So we've got the chunky normal on top, and then we've got that opacity that's going to come down as it goes towards no normal at all. So let's try it out. So it keeps going down and down according to the actual slider. So it's going to stay really chunky up here. Once we're, when we're above 0.5, it's staying pretty chunky. But then the minute we drop below 0.5, it's still there. You can see it. But it's much less, and it's going down at a different rate. Now, I think I want to see more of it here. I don't know if I can do that without getting really complicated down here. And I don't care enough about it that I'm going to make a big deal of it. Let's take a look and see what we can't fix here. So we've got, yeah, that'll work. Let's move this up to 0.3. Because 0 is still going to be 0. So it should work. So that's 0.55. We're going to drop through 0.5. Now there's still going to be a fair amount of snow on the ground at this point. And snow starts to appear in a major, like in a realistic way around here, as opposed to just random droplets. So yeah, you're just beginning to slick up there. I think that's a much better number. Okay. So our normals are done. What's not done is our scattering. And I think we can still use the same map. No, can't do that. All right. Yeah, we're going to have to make a new one for them. We're going to take this same formula, and we're going to apply it to this one as well. And this is going to be the color for our scatter. So let's get organized here. This is our normal. Oh, didn't mean to do that. I meant to do this. Okay. Now, we haven't made a scatter color for our ground yet either. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So we have our ground color here. This is our final ground color. I'm going to get a blend. I'm going to put this in here. We're going to get a black. We have to, because this is not a grayscale, and I want actually a solid black in there. I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to press D to dock it. And I'm going to come off of this first map. I'm going to make its own level node. Oh, sorry, this one. So something like that. Now, one of the problems with Substance is that the renderer doesn't do subsurface scattering. I do, however, do a little hack where, just for the purposes of seeing like where things are laying out, I'll assign it to the emissive, but I'll show you how I do that in a second. But it's not a subsurface, it's an emissive, so it's different. But it's good enough to see where things, like how it's spread out and stuff, but very often I'll turn it off because it becomes distracting, because sometimes having, that emissive there is actually worse than having nothing at all as far as seeing, so it depends on what part of the material I'm working on. I'll then either plug it in or unplug it, but at least it's set up. So this is the ground, which we should probably, I'm going to keep this down in the ground area. And we'll make a frame around this and call it scatter. And we're going to do this one, well, no, let's do it exactly the same way, and this way it's not confusing. this is our blacks right here. Right? So we have a grayscale black and we have a color black. The way these masks are set up here, we have the first one is our rocks, and our rocks will have no scatter at all. So I'm going to plug the black into the top spot. And then we'll take the scatter from the ground and we'll plug it in here. Next, we have the puddles. So we'll plug this into the background, and we use this mask to get our scatter color in here. And our scatter color is going to depend on whether or not we have the ice turned on or the ice turned off, according to this opacity right here. So we're going to plug it in. Wow, that's really bright. We're going to have to take that down. Oh yeah, we forgot to put a mask on this. We're going to need a second blend node here. And, let's use clouds. I'm going to get a levels node, and we'll plug this clouds in here. I don't want it to be just a straight, I don't want it to be flat. I want it to have some variety in it, in the mask. And we'll use that as the mask, and then we'll get our black color. And now we can plug that result in. Okay. We can't see anything here because, well, A, because it's not going to do scatter, but also because that all these nodes that we added, I'm not sure they're in the, well, no, specular was in there. Anyway, let's do this just in case. But then for this one, for our scatter, I'm going to right-click on this node, view in 3D view, and assign it to the emissive. And you can see how it changes it if we get rid of this noodle here. And so it's not really a subsurface, but if I also want to make sure that I have my materials set up, because I can also set the intensity of my emissive in here as well. So, like I said, it's a hack, but it gives you an idea of how it's spread out and whether your colors are working right, and I think it is, so I'm just going to get rid of it. So I believe, no, we don't have our roughness done yet. Let's take care of that. And I'm just going to copy that blend. I just want to make sure it's one with the, no, okay, you know what. I'm going to get another blend node. We're going to have to do the same thing for the roughness that we did for all these other nodes, because we need to have, the whole thing scaled down together. So it's more of the same. We have the opacity. Let's copy this one. We'll get into our new blend node. We'll create an empty function, and we'll paste it in there. And we can now decide what we're going to use for our roughness. I kind of like that. I want these higher bits rougher, and I want the lower bits shinier. So I'm going to start with this one as a base, and we're going to get a levels node. And we can get, we have a uniform. I don't want it pure black because that's weird, but we'll have it pretty close to there. And that's going to be our roughness. So right now I just have the mask up there as, what did I do there? Oh, I had the black in there. So we're just going to replace that black. In fact, what we can do, if we're being super efficient, we can use this black, and then we'll replace it down in here. So that when it's icing up, we have the white bits are more or less rougher, a lot rougher than the glassy bits. Yeah. that's okay. I mean, it looks weird with the green, but we've got, you know, the bits that are whitest are the roughest now. And I don't want them to get an ambient occlusion, so we're going to leave that white. You know, when I was testing it, I tried it with an AO on the snow, and it made it look dirty. Okay, so that's our little water section done. We can organize a bit more here. I'm going to make a frame, and we're going to just call this black. Okay, that's still pretty sort of organized. All right. We have finally now arrived at the point where we're going to be making our snow overlay, which is actually not such a big deal.